Hi guys, George here, and today what I'd like to bring to you is a discussion on S24 Sherman Marches West. Takes place on the 28th of June 1944 in Krupki, Belorussia. So basically, here what is going on is the Germans are doing a holding action and trying to prevent the Russians from an onslaught. The victory conditions is by game end. The Germans have to prevent the Russians from capturing the buildings here. Let's see if I can draw a circle around it. So here are the victory conditions. The Russians have to capture building 1, 2, 3, and 4 in this area and hold them until the end of the 7th player turn. The Russians, let's try to get used to this pen. It's pretty nifty, but it can be a little bit of a burden. The Russians center anywhere along the northern edge. So let's pick pink for the Russians. Right? Here, here. But remember, their victory objective is somewhere around here. And since you have 7 turns, there's no riders in this game. There's no armor assault. It's a starter kit scenario. You're very squeezed for time. And now, you got to look at the angle of attack, the possible angles of attack. And basically, here is open ground. This affords you cover. This area here affords you cover in 2 aspects. One is the grain, okay, plus, let's clean up. It's always good to clean up. Plus, if you're dealing with tanks, the other thing this area here affords is cover from the heights. So your armor can basically come down here unimpeded, and they have, for a couple of turns, their flanks covered on this side and through the woods from here. Whereas if they come from here, they might be exposed by the German AFVs. So very interesting venues of attack. Now, we'll start with the Germans and talk about how the Germans can best defend against this onslaught. You need to remember that the Germans start off with a very rudimentary force. Rudimentary, I mean 6, 3, 6, 9 second level squads, 1 AO leader, a crew, a AT gun. So 3, 6, 9. Come on, guys, get up. And some support weapons, and namely a heavy and a medium machine gun. These fellows here start on turn 1 with half of their movement points already expended. So we'll talk about that later. And basically, this is really the crux of your defense force. But they, however, only enter on turn 3. So, to let the big boys in, these guys have to hold the fort for 3 turns before they can get any amount of reasonable reinforcements. Now, why do I say that? Why do I have to wait until turn 3? Isn't the Tiger and the Panzer IV, I believe, or Panzer III, they're good enough to do the job? And the answer to that question is no, it isn't. Because they can end up being in a very vulnerable position because the Germans are outnumbered in manpower and armored fighting vehicles. Now, let's see a couple of suggested moves or setups for the German player. And you have to understand that in this game, as opposed to the advanced game, in this game, um, what's going on is that there is no fixture of the covered arc for the heavy and the MMG. It can swing around, as far as I know the rules. The AT gun can set up concealment in hip, actually, not in concealment. However, um, you really have to think about where to set them up because because basically um, what inexperienced players do is they tend to set up AT guns in woods and buildings like this. And what that does is that it is, unless the gun gets right, it is very detrimental um, to set them up in woods or buildings because if they need to turn their covered arc, then there's a +3 penalty, doubled if you're in the woods or in a building. Usually in the advanced game, what I do is I prefer, thanks to Charles Hammond for teaching me a lesson, I prefer to put them um, in grain, brush, or in orchards because this is concealment terrain. That's what we call in the advanced concealment terrain. It affords some cover. It's not open ground. However, there is no penalty for double penalty for moving your covered arc. So heavy. I would highly recommend putting the heavy somewhere along the lines of this area here, along with a leader, so it does not cower. It has a rate of fire of 3, and it can cover this open ground, and then it can cover this open ground, and some ground here. Now there's a plethora of ways you can set up your 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 AT gun. However, remember that your enemy will come in on the south side. No, you're there. That's the Germans. Your enemy will come up around here. Now, yeah, we're talking about the Shermans. 6 of them. If that wasn't enough. So, ideally, what you like to do is get a side shot. Their front armor is an 8. Their side armor is a 4, unless you hit them in the turret. If you notice, they have an armor factor that is encased with a square, meaning that the turret armor factor is the next step higher than a 4, which I believe is a 6. Okay, so where would I suggest to put the gun is, and the other thing that's important to note is there are large targets. Okay, so where do I put the gun? Put it on the flank. Where's that? I seem to be. Oh, there it is. It's underneath the AT counter. There it is. Put it on the flank. 1 grain deep into um, everything. Unconcealed. Let's just oops, get rid of that. Lately, I've been having all sorts of difficulty with Vaso. On the flank, just like so. There is another area here, I wouldn't suggest putting them directly in the path of the Soviets. For the MMG, you can cover the other flank, leave a couple of speed bumps in here. Also, you can also put a unit up there. And then you can leave a little bit of a reserve towards the rear. That's one of the plethora of various setups you can think of doing. Now, how about these guys in the front? Well, you need to get some shots in the first round. Otherwise, they're going to walk. The Soviets are going to walk all over you. Okay, so if you don't have any units up front, you will indefinitely or definitely allow them to come to the closer to their victory objective a lot quicker than planned. Now, as per the outrageous looking setup of the AT gun here, let's do a little example, okay? A little two-hit example. And I would even suggest coming in with your crew exposed to take advantage of the road movement rate. So let's do a little example here. A half, one. Don't forget these are movement points, not movement factors. So one and a half. Pretend this guy's hip. He can't see him. Two, three. At this juncture, something important is here to note. It's 1944, June 1944. This fellow can possibly fire in the tank using a Panzerfaust. So it needs a 1, 2, or 3. I rolled a 1. He has 1. Now to hit, he's 2 X's away, so he's in range. It's a 6, base 6, plus 1 for being a large, minus 1 for being a large target, and plus 2 because he's in motion. So the net effect is a 5 to hit. Rolled one more than I needed. Okay, so he continues. He decides not to fire a second time a support weapon. He comes here. So half, 1, 2, 3. Now I can fire his inherent firepower at 8 up 2. That's not so bad. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 out of the 8 table, I believe, is a 2 check. Yeah, a 2 check. So they need 6 or less, or they're going to go stunned. Okay, morale check. They can end up being pinned. So they're pinned. That means I have a plus 2 detriment to my to-hit roll. So let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 3.5. Let's capture the whole thing. Now he decides to fire. What will be the to-hit modifiers? Well, plus 2 for motion. He was in his line of sight for quite a few moves. Let's see. A half, 1, 2. All right, make it a plus 3. Plus 3 for movement. plus 2 hindrances makes a plus 5, and minus 1 because he's a large target. There'll be a 6 to hit because it's usually base 10 at this range. And he gets a side shot. Missed? No, great. But you could have really have waited until he came here, perhaps. Would have been a plus 2. My point is that you really don't have to constrain yourself to woods and buildings. Do consider brush and grain fields. And speaking of that, you could have also had him here, in which case he has line of sight all the way down to here. As the Russian player, be wary of two things. One, setting up too far from the target. This approach seems to be very conducive to a successful attack, and bringing everybody down to here would be great. And also keep in mind that these tanks also have white phosphorus and smoke, which is great for blinding your opponent. And the principal opponent, I suppose, are these jokers. Now, the way to be a more effective armor player, especially for the Germans, is by being cognizant that their movement is limited. So, limited in terms of the overall amount of movement points, plus by SSR, they enter at half their movement points already expended. Therefore, go crew exposed. Keep this fellow, a little tiny mole, as a protector of flanks. Go crew exposed. I have 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to stop. And he just expended his whole movement rate, but he now has good line of sight all over that area there. Allow me just to highlight it right here. Okay. Bring the other guy up and make sure he is a bit behind him. Change your turret cover arc in this direction. Oops, in the other direction. To ward off the enemy from flanking them. Ultimately, if you do encounter the Tiger as the Russian player, it is worth your while to consider using smoke to blind them, and then circle around behind him and knock him out from the rear. Both tanks, that is, not only one. How to use these forces, I believe, is self-explanatory. If the Russians already got a foothold on the village, then you have to counterattack and expel them from one of the 4 buildings. Not all 4, just one of the 4 buildings will be sufficient enough for you to win. So, those are my major takeaways for this scenario. If you have any comments, feel free to comment below. Respectfully, I may add. And I always want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for your support. It's very challenging to do the videos these days with the amount of work and, well, that fall and the winter didn't help. Didn't help matters much, but the good thing is I'll be seeing my doctor soon, and hopefully he'll set me on the right path and right track. So with that said, thank you once again. I greatly appreciate your views and telling people about this channel, and hopefully you'll find it helpful And the few tips that I've given you in a short period of time, 20 minutes, may they help you win a couple of tournaments and enjoy the game. Take care.